Welcome to When Gen X Ruled the Multiplex, in which I look at the films that shaped the developing minds of us Gen Xers when we were young and impressionable. 1982's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I looked at several months ago, was one of the first great teen films of the 80s. Today I'm looking at one of the last great teen films of the 80s, 1989's Say Anything, which was written and directed by the screenwriter of Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Cameron Crowe. We open in Seattle, where high school senior Lloyd Dobler and his friends DC and Corey talk about Lloyd's crush on the beautiful and brilliant Diane Court, the valedictorian of their graduating class. Lloyd is played by John Cusack, whom we saw briefly in both Stand By Me and 16 Candles. While Cusack appeared in many films throughout the 80s, Say Anything is generally regarded as his breakout role. Corey is played by the always wonderful Lili Taylor, known for Mystic Pizza and 6 Feet Under. DC is played by Amy Brooks, daughter of noted writer-producer James L. Brooks, who was the executive producer of Say Anything. In 1989, when Say Anything was released, James L. Brooks was also the executive producer of a brand new animated series that was set to premiere later that year on the fledgling Fox network, and he wanted to leverage his new film to help promote his new series. This is why some theatrical screenings of Say Anything were preceded by a short film featuring The Simpsons. At graduation, Diane Court gives a nervous yet sincere speech about how she's terrified about the future. Diane is played by Ione Skye, daughter of Scottish folk rocker Donovan. A military brat, Lloyd lives with his single mom sister and her young son while their parents are stationed in Germany. Lloyd's sister is played by John Cusack's real-life sister Joan, who'd received an Oscar nomination for Working Girl the year before Say Anything's release. Diane's doting father Jim, who manages a retirement home, lavishes Diane with expensive gifts, including jewelry and a brand new car. Diane, who stayed socially isolated during high school to focus on her academics, considers her father her best friend. Jim Court is played by the late John Mahoney, beloved as Martin Crane on Frasier. Deciding to finally act on his longtime crush on Diane, Lloyd calls the court home and leaves a message with Jim. Diane, meanwhile, is awarded a fellowship to study in England. She's thrilled, though due to her lifelong fear of flying, she's terrified at the prospect of going on a plane. Even though Diane doesn't really know who Lloyd is, she returns his call. He's funny and charming on the phone, and she agrees to go with him to a post-graduation party. The party is held at the home of a former classmate, played in a quick cameo by Eric Stoltz, whom we've already seen in Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Some Kind of Wonderful. This party bursts at the seams with recognizable guest stars, including future Entourage star Jeremy Piven, Jason Gould, son of Elliot Gould and Barbara Streisand, Lauren Dean, who would go on to play the title role in Billy Bathgate, China Phillips of the 90s pop trio Wilson Phillips, whom we saw briefly in Some Kind of Wonderful, Pamela Adlon, known for Californication and Louie, and another Frasier star, Bebe Neuwirth, who plays the school's career counselor who despairs of Lloyd's utter refusal to make any plans for his future. Also in attendance at the party are 2/3 of the Heathers from the 1988 dark comedy Heathers, which I've already looked at here. Kim Walker, who played Heather Chandler, and Lisanne Falk, who played Heather McNamara. Corey has composed 65 bitter and angry songs about her cheating ex-boyfriend Joe, which she sings at the party while strumming her guitar and glaring angry daggers at Joe. It's a popular opinion that Corey is the greatest character in Say Anything, and I will not argue with that. By the time Lloyd takes Diane home from the party, it's already morning. Even though Diane only has 6 weeks before she leaves for England, Diane and Lloyd feel enough of a connection that they decide to spend much of that time together. So Diane invites Lloyd over to dinner with her father and some friends of the family. Lloyd, who is outgoing and charming around his fellow teenagers, is an awkward mess around adults, and he makes a shaky impression. When grilled as to his future plans, Lloyd gives a speech about how he doesn't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything for a living. Lloyd's anti-capitalist leanings fail to impress Jim, who considers him unworthy of Diane's affections. In the middle of dinner, the IRS arrives to tell Jim he's under criminal investigation for tax evasion. Diane lunches with her divorced mother and urges her not to say anything negative about Jim to the IRS. Diane's mother is played by former Bond girl Lois Chiles, Holly Goodhead in Moonraker. Her mom's new boyfriend Ray is played by Stephen Shortridge, who played a variety of TV heartthrobs throughout the 80s. This was his very last screen appearance. After Say Anything, Shortridge retired from acting and is now a well-known impressionistic painter. Over the course of the summer, Diane and Lloyd fall in love, and they get it on while listening to Peter Gabriel's In Your Eyes. Fun fact, Peter Gabriel allegedly wrote In Your Eyes about his then-girlfriend, actress Rosanna Arquette, who we've already seen in Desperately Seeking Susan. This makes it the second well-known and much-loved pop song rumored to be about Rosanna Arquette, after Toto's Rosanna in 1982. Because Diane and Jim have the kind of relationship where she feels she can say anything to her father, That's exactly how the film gets its title. Diane tells Jim she's sleeping with Lloyd. Jim, who disapproves of Lloyd's slacker ways, is dismayed by this. He urges Diane to break up with Lloyd so she can start a new life in England with no attachments. He suggests she gives Lloyd a farewell gift of a fancy pen to ease the blow. Diane calls Lloyd at the gym where he teaches kickboxing to children. Despite the Seattle setting, part of this film was shot in Los Angeles, and Lloyd's kickboxing gym is also the Cobra Kai dojo from The Karate Kid. Lloyd and Diane go for a drive, and Diane follows her father's advice and breaks up with him. And yes, she gives him the damn pen, which goes over about as well as you'd think. Lloyd is shattered, Diane is equally miserable, and it's a scene that drips with so much emotional authenticity that it's downright painful to watch. A heartbroken Lloyd drives around in the pouring rain. It's impossible to tell, but apparently that couple walking in front of Seattle's Westlake Center is director Cameron Crowe and his then-wife, singer-songwriter Nancy Wilson, co-founder of Heart. Wilson also provided music for Say Anything's excellent soundtrack, which includes music from Red Hot Chili Peppers, The Replacements, and Depeche Mode. Nursing his broken heart, Lloyd hangs out with some of his dude friends outside a convenience store. They give him a bunch of terrible romantic advice while engaging in some hilariously awful freestyle rapping. While shopping for luggage for Diane's upcoming move to England, Jim finds his credit lines have been cut off. Aware the walls are closing in, Jim huddles in the bathtub, fully dressed, and quietly falls apart. Diane is awoken at night by the strains of In Your Eyes. She finds Lloyd standing beneath her bedroom window, hoisting his boombox over his head, desperate to remind her of the night they made love. Lloyd holding the boombox has become one of the most iconic images in 80s teen cinema and is now shorthand for expressing romantic devotion. Even though in the film the gesture does not work, Diane simply rolls over in bed and goes back to sleep. Diane visits the IRS offices and talks to a manager played by character actor Philip Baker Hall, known for films like Magnolia and Boogie Nights. He's brutally honest with her. Her father has been stealing money from retirement home patients for years. While snooping around the house, Diane finds her father's stash of ill-gotten cash. When she confronts Jim, he denies everything, and she realizes their complete honesty with each other has been one-sided all along. A distraught Diane visits Lloyd at the gym, where he gets clobbered by his sparring partner, who is played by 11-time world kickboxing champion Don the Dragon Wilson. Diane tells Lloyd she needs him, and they reconcile. Jim receives a 9-month prison sentence. Lloyd visits Jim in prison and tells him he's going to England with Diane, because all he wants to do with his life is support her. Diane shows up at the last minute to tell her father goodbye and to present him with the farewell gift of a pen. Well played, Diane. Diane and Lloyd take off for England to start their new life together. Even though Diane is terrified of flying, Lloyd holds her hand and talks her through liftoff. Say Anything is a relatively uncomplicated film about two nice kids who enjoy each other's company and treat each other well. In the 80s, Cameron Crowe specialized in writing films populated by teen characters who seemed like fundamentally decent human beings. In both Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Say Anything, Crowe is clearly intrigued by the social structures of American high schools, but unlike, say, the films of John Hughes, he doesn't give them much power. Diane is a beautiful and brilliant academic star, while Lloyd is a quirky yet amiable slacker, but none of their peers think that means they can't be a couple. The social spheres aren't rigid. Everyone at the school shows up to that graduation party, including the career counselor, and everyone is welcome. As with Fast Times at Ridgemont High, this is the American high school as a laid-back melting pot, not as an assortment of fiercely territorial tribes. Say Anything wrapped up the 80s by taking a step back from the overheated, coked-up, status-chasing, power-mad fervor that characterized the decade in anticipation of the more mellow 90s. The Seattle setting of Say Anything is key. At this moment in history, grunge music was percolating beneath the surface before breaking into the mainstream in 1991, and Seattle was ground zero, with bands like Nirvana and Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam all hailing from the Emerald City. Pearl Jam's Stone Gossard, then known for Mother Love Bone, filmed a deleted cameo for Say Anything in which he played a cab driver. Grunge was a rejection of the MTV-ready glossiness of 80s pop. It was also strongly anti-consumerist in nature, and that's Lloyd. In Say Anything, Lloyd's rejection of capitalism clashes with Jim's corrupt pursuit of material possessions. Jim is an embezzler, and the film is littered with evidence of his ill-gotten gains, such as Diane's new car, her jewelry, and most notably, the fancy vintage Wurlitzer jukebox in the court living room. The Wurlitzer jukebox, introduced in the 1940s, was an 80s status symbol. It popped up an awful lot in films and videos and TV shows because it's a beautiful device that looks fabulous on screen, and because it's a handy visual representation of good times and playful affluence. Here, though, it represents Jim's corruption. Even before we know about Jim's misdeeds, that jukebox looks out of place in the court living room. Jim hasn't just splurged on a pricey piece of nostalgia that reminds him of his younger years. He has stolen money from the elderly clients in his care to buy luxuries he otherwise couldn't afford. Lloyd, who doesn't want to be bought, sold, or processed, is the antithesis of Jim. They share no core beliefs other than their unshakable faith in Diane. Lloyd is also the antithesis of Joel, the character played by Tom Cruise in one of the great teen films from the beginning of the 80s, Risky Business. As I noted when I looked at Risky Business many months ago, Joel is desperate for success as it was defined in the early 80s. He wants to get into Princeton, and he wants to make a lot of money, even though the pressure to succeed is turning him into a nervous wreck. Lloyd rejects everything Joel holds dear because young Gen Xers in 1989 were starting to expect different things from life than young Gen Xers in 1983. Lloyd doesn't want to get into Princeton, he just wants to lead a good life, and for him that means doing everything he can to help Diane lead a good life. I was pretty neutral on Say Anything when it was released in 1989. I was in high school at the time, the same age as these characters, and films about high schoolers were less interesting to me at that age than they had been 4 or 5 years earlier. I was also closer in temperament to neurotic Joel from Risky Business than slacker Lloyd from Say Anything, and Lloyd's aimlessness bothered me far more than it needed to. Watching the film now, it's clear Lloyd is doing fine. He'll teach kickboxing to kids in England or find some other way to make a living, and whether he and Diane stay together or ultimately part ways, he'll probably lead a happy life. Time has shown me that Say Anything is a good film, with two very nuanced relationships at its core, Diane and Jim and Diane and Lloyd. It features strong, subtle performances from all the leads, which, in combination with Cameron Crowe's solid script, gives us an effective portrayal of teens transitioning into adulthood as the 80s transitioned into the 90s. Next time, we are going to tag along with Detective Axel Foley as he takes on the mean streets of Beverly Hills in the top-grossing film of 1984, Beverly Hills Cop. Thank you for joining me. I will meet you back here later.